Welcome to St. Charles at Home, our weekly opportunity to participate in a discussion between a member of the parish and the priest who preached the Sunday before. Today we're happy to have Francis Chin, a longtime and very active member of the parish. Francis, it's great to have you here today. And if you could tell us something about yourself.
Hi, I'm Francis Chin. I'm one of the two parish trustees of St. Charles. I've been involved for quite a while. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Well, technically I was born in Manhattan, but spent my entire life in Brooklyn. The product of the Catholic schools here. Went to Immaculate Heart of Mary parochial school, Xaverian High School, and then I broadened my horizons and crossed over the river to Manhattan to go to New York University. And then I went to Brooklyn Law School for law school. After a couple years of practicing, I got a job as an administrator at Brooklyn Law School. So I moved from where I was living in Kensington and moved downtown near the law school in 1999. Fast forward quite a few years later, I met my wife, Pei, and I got married at St. Charles. I was supposed to be married by Monsignor Al, but Father Ed Duran, now Monsignor Ed Duran, was coming in. He came in on a Thursday. I got married on Saturday after he showed up. So I was actually his first wedding when he arrived at St. Charles. My daughter Abby just turned 7, and she's in the second year of the family faith program.
Oh, thank you. I realize that I touched on a number of topics this week, and questions could be asked on how they all come together. Is there anything in particular that you would like to raise about it?
Well, I think there's there's an interplay about your message on your email message on the first reading. About hope and like how hope is derived not from what we want, but what what is given by God, and how it interplays with what do we do with the parable of the weeds. The grain is distributed, and the evil one, we assume the adversary comes and sows the weeds. If we know that we're going to be up against adversity, how do we have hope that we will be part of the harvest once that is over?
Whenever possible, I try to speak on hope, and always go back to the definition of hope within the Catechism of the Church. Hope is not optimism. It has very little to do with external realities. It's rather the firm belief, the firm conviction that the resurrection worked, that we have been given new life, and that we can, by Jesus, always connect to that new life. Thus, that is hope. That, in a sense, the war has been won, but there are still battles along the way. So we see in both Romans, the first reading of the day, and we'll see it even more this week, that we are not made for frustration. The Romans talks about groaning, that the whole creation, our humanity, the Holy Spirit are all frustrated because of our inability to be fulfilled by our own actions, what Paul calls being in the flesh. But we are offered to be in the Spirit, to be truly connected to God. And even though there are enemies within and without, and we will flourish we will be fulfilled because of what Jesus has done for us at his death and his resurrection.
So I think this is one of the few parables where Jesus actually explains the parable. I guess, if does that tend to limit the application of this parable, or is like?
Very good question, and it points to the heart of the parable as an art form. It is unlikely that Jesus gave any explanation of it. What we see here is the author, St. Matthew, giving an application to the church of his day. Most scholars, not all, not 100%, but most scholars would say that the parables go back to Jesus, that they're as close to the words that Jesus spoke that we're ever going to hear. But they're to bring us to an understanding, and in Matthew's case, very definitely of the kingdom, of what does it mean to be in harmony with God, harmony with our neighbors, harmony with nature. You can't provide a description of that. You can't provide a description of new life. But the parable is, like many stories, is able to bring us to the point where we get a glimpse of it, just like lightning. And so that is what these parables are designed to do: give us an insight into what the kingdom will be in its fullness, but what we're expected to do now, which is why I'm so happy that we're doing the parables as we prepare to reopen the church. But as I suggested, I question whether it's reopening as much as refounding. I think the changes will be that profound. And look what the parables offer us. They bring us to the point where we can see what the new reality what Jesus is calling us to do in general, but also specifically, how do we apply that? How do we apply the call to diversity, which is certainly there, the call to let people grow, and we'll see that in the parables for this week, perhaps even more powerfully. What does that mean to the members of St. Charles Borromeo now? The parables are always directing us to now, and it's it's spoken to all of us. To what do we see? What insight is God giving us for our community now?
So you talk about St. Charles being an intentional community, one that people decide to belong to.
Yes.
Is every church supposed to be an intentional community, or is it just a is it just a territory? Have we just gotten into this whole territorial thing, and then?
Well, as you know, I have a background in organizing. I was never a professional. Was always one of the people who implemented the strategies, not really designed them. But I speak several times a year to really, really sharp organizers. And I remember just before this started, one of the great organizers, probably of the century, Mike Geegan, said to me, "We're going to find out which churches are intentional, because the rest of them are going to disappear." Not immediately, but you're going to look around. You're going to see no young people. Probably a precipitous financial decline to those places which people have not made the intention of going. There are some places that have the luxury of many, many numbers, even a few left in Brooklyn, a few more in Queens, many more on the island. But this is going to show us what we have to make our communities someplace that people know that they're wanted. We have to make the intention of being welcoming, or as the Holy Father says, being a parish where the people accompany those who come to our doors, no matter who they are. And then that will call forth the intention for people to come here. Just look at our young our young professional group, at least our young professional group as of March. How many of them lived within the parish boundaries? Very, very few. We have our religious education program for youth was always mostly outside the parish boundaries because people made the intention to come here because it was a very good program that recognized where people were. We have a lot of professional people. They're just not going to fit into the regular box, and we reached out to accommodate them. And we all owe Maureen Pond a tremendous debt of thanks. We have to go through everything as we return, restore, renew, refound St. Charles, and ask, are we behaving like that? Are we giving people a reason to intend to come here?
So when you were growing up in the church, did you you mentioned your mother in your homily, you described her as an Irish hippie.
Yeah, right. No, she didn't fall. But yes, I think I said more of like an activist bomb thrower type with gloves.
So, yeah. So was that your inspiration to become involved in community organizing, or was it your encounter with Mike Keegan?
It was more, I was in a parish and in Bed-Stuy, which is unique in that Black people owned a lot of it. Even if they, you had some of these people from the islands, particularly Jamaica and Trinidad, who would come here and buy property. They had to own property, and some of them owned a good number of buildings. People were trying to take it. This was in the late 90s. And so I and a number of other people, Catholic priests, tried to organize. And we were, I know how roadkill feels. We were amateurs. We had no idea what we were doing. We then went to professionals, Metro IAF, a Saul Alinsky group, and they taught us how to organize. And very interestingly, because the organizer was my age, and he said, you have to get over your anti-institutional bias, because the only way you're going to make this thing work is to make the institutions work for you. And that was that was for me a very interesting thing, because I grew up with a mother who did not suffer fools gladly, and particularly when they were elected officials who she thought should be a public servant. So you have this thing about calling them the honorable. It was like almost a fetish on her part. But I grew up knowing that a good citizen is involved. Probably grew up with an anti-institutional bias that I had to overcome. You have to learn how to change the institution to make it work for you, but you can't get anything done as a sort of lone being a prophet is nice, but I'd rather get homes for people.
Yeah, you also mentioned John Lewis, the recently deceased congressman.
Yes.
from Georgia, and I think he has a similar trajectory, in terms of both being leader of the protest movement at that time, and also becoming part of the institution as becoming a
Yes.
congressperson.
And learned how to work it very, very well, and we're all beneficiaries of it.
Yeah, I've heard of the stories about like how he got over his fear of his difficulties in public speaking by like preaching to the chickens.
Chickens, yes. If I may be allowed to plug a book, one of the books that's had the most effect on me is David Halberstam's The Children. It was about the generation of activists who followed Martin Luther King. John Lewis would be an example. People who we might not have heard of as much, like Bernard Lafayette, who recently wrote for the Times, who's in his late 80s now. Now, one man who's like ancient, James Lawson, who was probably the person who brought these people together for nonviolence. These were extraordinary people. And the book is well worth reading. It will show you what activism, or more to the point, what nonviolence was capable of accomplishing. And it's in many ways a call to return to that spirit if we're going to have the same effect.
One of the things that I guess like persons may or may not know is that you are an avid sci-fi fan.
Yes. Well, very specific sci-fi.
Right. Doctor Who and
Doctor Who.
Star Trek.
Star Trek.
So, how you were exposed to Doctor Who when you were growing up?
Well, remember, Doctor Who came in two basic stages. The classic Doctor Who from the 60s to the early 80s was really a man of common sense and decency. And he did not have any special powers, although he could travel in time. But he would use very much the 60s ethic of community, of we're all in this together, and was also very much committed to nonviolence, never killed anybody. The second phase reflects our time. That would have come, I think the first one was what, 2005?
Right. Yeah, my first experience with Doctor Who was actually more of the Tom Baker era.
Yeah. Tom Baker, and then Nick Davidson after him.
Right.
Then I think it never really had a person who had the charisma. Tom Baker, who is still alive, you still see him at things. Maybe even at Comic-Con. But again, someone who was committed to using intelligence and nonviolent solutions.
Mm-hmm.
The most recent doctors reflect our time and are dealing more, like they will have more of an emphasis on the ecology and some of the problems that come from a desire for totalitarian rule. In some ways, I think it's a little darker, but maybe our times are darker.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to I know San Diego Comic-Con has gone virtual this year, and
yes,
it's online. Have you ever attended any of these conferences? Comic conferences or any like science fiction conferences?
Not the comic conferences, but there were festivals in the late 60s for speculative fiction and other things. I went to them then, but of course I was much younger, and I don't see myself getting dressed up as a Gallifreyan cardinal.
I do mention this because just going back to John Lewis, John Lewis before, in 2005, I believe, he, he was inspired. He said he was inspired to participate in the Pettus Bridge March from, following Dr. King from a comic book.
Hmm.
He had someone had given him a copy of a Dr. Martin Luther King comic book, and that illustrated his nonviolent philosophy, and he was inspired to follow him because of that. And so, yes,
he was also a Star Wars fan.
yeah. So he had the opportunity to actually co-author a trilogy of a graphic novel of his life, and he actually went to the Comic-Con in 2015, and he actually cosplayed. He actually dressed in the same outfit, and he had the same backpack that he had, when he was on the Pettus Bridge March, with the same contents. And then after he had the session, where he was like, promoting his comic book, there was a number of school children with him, and they actually led a march through the conference center. Yes. So, I thought that was particularly inspirational.
And I think that's on YouTube too. I think I saw it on.
Yeah. So, so what do you think of the new Star Trek? Star Trek Picard.
I have liked both of them. I like Picard better. I was just beginning to like the characters in the Star Trek, the actual Star Trek reboot, by the end of the first season. The second season, I thought I got away from them. I'm hoping for a little more structure on the next one. But Picard was, he's truly an interesting man, and recognizing that Patrick Stewart is a wonderful actor, they were able to bring out more of the character by relying on his skills.
Do you think that the Star Trek ethos in general has been influenced by Catholic faith or Catholic philosophy?
I don't know whether it's Catholic, but certainly Gene Roddenberry would bring up Christian references. Just look at some of the names of the people: Captain Kirk, Nurse Chapel. The references to sun, and then you realize it's not S-U-N, it's S-O-N that they are talking about. I don't even know whether you could get away with that now, and someone would find some objection. But certainly, the original Star Treks, which I've been watching again, recognizing that I was young but sentient at the time. I remember what was going on in the late 60s, and it reflected it. Racial bias, in particular, the first interracial kiss on television. They were pretty dark days, and yet Star Trek always found a way for hope. Sort of, and hope, I think, in some ways, in the Christian sense, that it's not just the externals that matter. There's something deeper. There's something that you can connect to. Whether that is on any television show now, I've watched so little of it that I couldn't tell you.
I guess this is like sort of a similar theme between what reflecting on John Lewis's life and reflecting on the progression of Star Trek. It's like, are we repeating our history? Are we revisiting history? Are we able to take the lessons of the 60s in our time, in this time world?
I think what we're seeing is we did pretty well in the 60s. We'll get to changes. But the problem with nonviolence is that it's extremely difficult and you run out of steam. And I think even John Lewis was saying that at the end, that it was that he hopes that the movement that's beginning now would not end in violence, like when SNCC ceased to be nonviolent coordinating committee. What I'm hoping and praying for is that we will learn the lessons first of Dr. King and James Lawson and John Lewis and Bernard Lafayette, and that host of extraordinary people then, and that we need a commitment to something beyond ourselves in order to make changes. I think we need a commitment to nonviolence, as difficult as it is for me personally to do. But also we need to recognize that there's a need. Activism is wonderful, but it's only the first step. After that, you need to organize. It's interesting now, without making too obvious a political statement. I'm not particularly in sympathy with the ideals of the Tea Party. However, you have to admit that they organized extremely well from the ground up and were able to make many of the changes that they wanted, whatever you may think of them. People who wish other kinds of changes, whether it be in completely white schools in Westchester with a black teacher, so that the students, black and white, can experience a black authority figure, to my own personal passion, creating a means for black and other minority groups, the indigenous Americans being classic among them, to get property, to get a real mortgage, not a subprime mortgage. I lived during the last recession in the subprime capital of New York State. We were beaten by a county in California, but it was horrible, absolutely horrible. These people had good salaries, they were hard workers, and you watched one after another of them have to lose their homes, or even worse, be allowed to stay there, but pay rent that was greater than their mortgage payments. It was truly horrible. That if we should be able to organize people to extend loans, whether it means encouraging black banks, which have been declining. When I was in Bed-Stuy, I was able to have an account in a black bank. I just assumed I could do that when I went out to South Jamaica. Forget it. Here, it would be utterly impossible. Things like that are extremely important. We need to think of simple or bedrock organizing things like that.
Yeah, I think it does take endurance and maybe years or decades to address systemic issues, systemic biases against against those people, against us, this affects all of us. It's like
it was there.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was there before us. It's not our fault that I can walk into a store and I'm not being watched like a hawk. Whereas if I go with a black friend, one of whom she was dying to show me this. think she was in her late 20s at the time, very well-dressed African-American woman, is now a tenured professor of architecture. And she said, watch this. And we went into a store, and she just walked around. Every eye of every salesperson was on her. It was absolutely freaky. Now, it's not my fault that that there's white privilege even in that very simple way. More complex, that if I go to if I start shaking and go to into an emergency room, they don't test me for opioids. They do black people, black man, certainly one younger than me, same symptoms, is going to be tested. It's just, we have to just acknowledge that that's there, and also that you can't protest your way out of this. You can't sign a pledge against white privilege. It's a joke because it's still there. One has to commit oneself to changing the society, to organizing so that these things don't exist. Whatever I may or may not want to do in my head is not going to have any effect. It's what we do with our hands to rebuild the community and create what Martin Luther King called the beloved community.
Right. It's like, you know, I'm conscious of some of my privilege, as well as like I am, you know, my parents, I'm ethnically Chinese, but my family is from the Caribbean. My dad is from Jamaica, and I was from Trinidad, and so
now there's a mixed marriage.
Yes. and it's very apparent where, you know, that, you know, I guess I have this sort of, perhaps in this, like in the same way, like a Doctor Who type of inside this, a character that's inside and outside of the inside and outside, you know, vantage point at the same time. And it's, you know, I guess it's maybe it's best and worst of the whole situations, I guess, in terms of, you know that your experiences could be very predictable, and your friends' experiences could be very predictable, but my experiences are totally not predictable. You know, I may have the experience, your experience in one place. I may have the exact same experience as your friend's experience in another location. And so, and you know, and this is the appearance I have, and so this is the one I'm, you know, this is what I have to, you know, what I have to live with. So I guess I'm doubly confounded in the sense, like, you know, I want to do something, I can do something, at the same time, you know, it's just receiving direction to do something to help, and also how can I lead other people to help too as well. It's an interesting position to be in terms of being in this intersection among all of this whole situation, and also trying to do something about it as well. So I think we're almost at the end of the time here. So I guess the last question I have is, like, have you ever been to the South, or like I've been to the Brown versus Board. I've been to Kansas. I actually visited the Brown versus Board of Education Museum. We actually saw the school, and they actually had exhibits where they had the water fountains, you know, the several water fountains for black and white students. Did you see it did you see those things? Did you experience those things exist in New York, or or definitely in the South? If you visited any locations there,
I lived in North Carolina in the early 70s.
Mhm.
And by that point, all the official signs were gone, which is sort of amazing in a period of a number of years. But a lot of the attitudes were still there, and you could pick it up without too much difficulty. Of course, the attitudes against Catholics weren't that great either. So there was and I went to a parish that was predominantly black, and that was an interesting experience in 1973.
Mhm. So would you say that well, you wed black Catholic parishes before? Would you say that the experience is how does that experience relate with the entire Catholic Church in terms of like the local experience? It's like is it an expression of their community in life, or is it?
Yeah, it was certainly authentically Catholic. There was we would emphasize things a little differently. Mass went on, of course, much longer because everything was sung. And then there was more community activities at the end of Mass. But we had rosary societies and holy names and Knights of Columbus and excellent Bible study. Excellent. We used I looked at 15 groups at one point doing the Little Rock program, which is the most demanding but valuable of all of them. It was I think, connected to the church, rather traditionally in most ways, but allowing an ethnic expression with music but also with a different sense of community. I mean, I had to limit the Kiss of Peace, otherwise, I tried to hit about 8 minutes, but sometimes it'll go on longer, and I had to try to put the toothpaste back in the tube. I don't see that working in every place, but I think it just shows people have different needs to express themselves in community, and it should be respected and developed.
Yeah, I think St. Charles may have I guess in our pandemic situation, we probably have the exact opposite, where we can't actually have physical contact, sharing a piece.
Yes, well, friends of mine in African American parishes are saying they have to say they have to basically now you stay in your seat. You stay in your seat.
So, but I guess we have these new times, and I guess we'll change. We would change and still maintain the same tradition and in the best way we can.
Sure.
So I think we had a very good conversation today.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I hope to see you this Sunday, or actually this Saturday, for
Saturday,
confirmation.
Yes.
Okay. and I always enjoy talking with you. And I hope you get the chance to see some of the videos from Comic-Con.
Right. I'll do my best. Okay.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Where there's no true
We're gonna take a break a second. Abby.